welcome. My name is Nathaniel Whitestone, or Nate, as all of you folks here on the call with me well know, but I'm saying that for you people who are watching this on recording in the future. So we have several people who are local politicians in Forest Row in East Sussex, England, and a pair of sociocracy consultants and general busybodies who are trying to make the world a better place in other ways. And we're here to have a conversation about sociocracy in Forest Row. So I'm saying welcome to you councilors here on the call because you've done something that only a few communities have done, especially across the UK, which is taking your local council non-partisan so that it's in the hands of people rather than political parties. So for those listening in, this is often referred to as flat pack democracy because our mutual friend Peter McFadyen wrote a book of that name about how the people of FRow did exactly that about 12 years ago. But then you folks here, along with all of your other colleagues in the council of Forest Row, did something which is a first in the UK. You began using sociocracy as part of the way that you run your council. So on May 16th, 2023, you invited me to facilitate a process to help you elect your chair and vice chair. And I think a lot of people online will be interested in how this goes. So thank you very much for being willing to meet with me and talk about your experience. And I just want to give people who are listening in a chance to learn a little bit more about all of us. And so I want to go around and have up to 2 minutes to each introduce ourselves. But I'm going to try to demonstrate that much more briefly. See if I can do it in 30 seconds or so. But then I'll go around and call on everybody. I've been interested in sustainable communities since being a co-founder of the Eco-Village Network of the Americas back in the mid-90s. And I came over to the UK following the person who's currently my wife to her home, and then brought sociocracy over here in 2007 as part of the Transition Town movement. And ever since then, I've been passionately interested in where sociocracy and self-management and community power might go in the UK. So it's a real pleasure to be exploring that with you folks today. I want to go to Susie next, just because Susie, of all the people on this call, Susie is the person in Forest Row that I've been talking about this stuff with for the longest time. So Susie, who are you?
I'm Susie Miller. I was a parish councillor for quite a few years, but have only stopped, not because I didn't love it, because I did, but because of other factors. And I'm incredibly excited about what's happening now with this council, and wishing I could be part of it, because it's so different from what I experienced.
Thank you. Let's go to Benjamin next, and then Patricia. Benjamin.
Thanks, Nate. My name is Benjamin Christie, and yes, I'm part of a group of people who came together to, essentially use the flat pack democracy model to explore what it would look like having an independent group of councillors looking to enable and catalyse what wants to happen in our community. And it comes from, quite a long-standing interest in localization and what local grassroots participatory democracy might look like, and how that might change how things turn out now and in the future.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Patricia, and then Edward.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Patricia Patterson Vanegas, and I am very interested in political reform. I dream of a compassionate and caring society that honors nature and human beings. And I will do whatever it takes to get to the dream. So I have been an activist. 4 years ago, I was elected as a district councillor, not parish councillor, for FRow. And I have been working with this great group of people here and a wider group of residents to shake local democracy. Just get people engaged, get people dreaming a different world, and then make it happen. So yeah, that's what excites me.
Oh, thank you. Edward and then Ted.
Hi, I'm Edouard, French. I've moved in Forestwood 3 years ago, and the year before that, I lived in Froome. So I was familiar in a way with the flat pack democracy. I had met Peter McFadden there. I didn't know about this new movement, which we call Forest for Forward, to take over the council of, what was it, 6 months ago? It's a bit of a shock. So when you say here are politicians, I'm still not quite used to it, but I guess this is what it is. My background is scientific, very scientific background, and then I was in academics in physics, and then I've been a carpenter, straw bale builder for quite a while now, and quite interested in some things called collapsology, deep adaptation, and it's all about the multiple crises that are coming in the world. So I have tried to look at things globally, but then the action has to be on the terrain, and so when I found about this adventure, I thought, why not? And Sociocracy, I heard quite a while ago through XR a bit. There, I studied their model, and then I saw you, Nate, giving a talk in a Tablehurst like a year or so ago, and dug into it, and yeah, sounds interesting.
Wonderful. And Ted, my longtime ally in the global sociocracy movement. Why are you here?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So yes, my name is Ted, part of Sociocracy FRow. And the reason I'm here is because I am always interested in uses of sociocracy, for one. And the other one, more concrete occasion, is that I'm working on a book called Collective Power that should be out in fall. And I am using stories of implementation of self-organization in all kinds of different sectors, including in government. So I want to hear this one.
Okay, wonderful. So I have a few questions for you all, as you all know, but please feel free to sort of explore beyond the question if something comes up. But I want to start with a focus on the thing that's really brought us all here today, which is the question of what was different for you about using a sociocratic election by consent rather than a majority rule vote for choosing your council chair and vice chair. And I'm drilling in on your own personal experience, but maybe I should say very briefly for people who are listening in who haven't experienced an election by consent before, and to say that very simply, an election by consent is an election that happens through positive arguments that are made in favor of different candidates, that really brings out the best thinking of the group about who can best serve in a role. And the decision is not made by counting how many people favor different candidates. So it has very different outputs, as I'm hoping we're about to hear. So can I just start our conversation in a different place and go with you, Edward?
Right. Election by consent. Yeah, that was a nice experience. Huh? I think it was a month ago. And to be honest, it was not the official council where we elected. It was an experiment we were doing before, and we have to remain that when it's the true council, it's still open to debate. Otherwise, it's what you call predetermination, which you have to try to avoid. So it was an experiment, and it was quite interesting, intense, and successful. It lasted 1 hour, and I do think that the outcome of this election would have been different if it had been run in a different way, like a vote by majority. I see it as, yeah, it's a very positive way to look at people. You try to pump up and tell what the good sides of the people are rather than downmining others. That was good. So it's gonna be tricky to try to see if we can make it a common pattern, if we can reuse this process in further meetings, and we have a few more committees meeting which will have to elect their chairs. Now each committee is in principle free to self-organize in their ways to do. We'll see if we reuse that process later.
Thank you, Edward. And how was it for you, Patricia?
Well, I guess what I have heard touched people about the process was that it became a very positive experience. Rather than trying to climb up and say why I am so good at this and I want to be the leader, it became people saying, well, actually, I would like this person because, and then they proceeded to say all the positive things they thought about them, which to me is just so refreshing and so nourishing, really. And then the consent that happened after listening to everybody else just made it so incredibly different and wonderful, really.
Thank you. Benjamin, how about you? What was different for you?
Yeah, very much echoing what these two are saying. It became a series of positive reflections on various people's attributes that either as chair or vice chair would be appropriate in holding the constellation in respect of whether they were chair or vice chair. And it felt very creative. It painted quite a few different possibilities, as you know, as Patrice is saying, instead of a kind of entrenched oppositional competitive kind of dynamic, which might have taken a lot longer. It was very magical in the way that, despite it being deliberative and creative, it all took place within the allotted time. That also felt very useful and constructive in the sense of being able to keep to time. And I guess the last thing that really occurred to me is this kind of climb down from the escalation that can so often happen when something feels important, of this safe enough to try, good enough for now piece, even though this was, you know, felt like an important step. This wasn't, you know, a nuclear America kind of arms negotiation or war games or some such. And so it really gave people permission to try on different sets of possibilities. And I guess the last thing I'd say is, you know, even I was one of the people who people put forward in different kind of ways, as were several others. And that felt very validating because I heard reflections around, you know, what people had seen. But it was very interesting in the way that as it occurred, lots of people took themselves out of the running. And then we were only left with two who felt like extremely positive choices and have done since. So I think the group felt very clear that that's the way it's going to be and it's the right thing, and so did they. So all in all, it was a really good process, very interesting.
Great, thank you. And Susie, what was different for you? You were in the previous council.
Yes, and what was lovely was I was there as a member of the public, but because it wasn't the official process, it was more the decision making. I was able to join in, which is very unique. And I'd had some experience of being, thanks to you, through that process, which I found groundbreakingly different from anything else. And so I knew it was going to be an amazing experience. But early on, like the first half an hour, I'm thinking, oh my God, there's all these different people they want. How the hell in an hour are we going to get this decision made? This is going to go for it, Nate. And obviously, I think it was an example, which is really important to note, of how skillfully these need to be managed. That is essential. It's not the same as just having a normal chair of a meeting. You need someone with the real skill to hold that space. And your skill was that you listened to everyone, and then you went, and then when it went off at a track, and I'm thinking, oh no, one voice you went with it and you said, okay, I can see that what you want to discuss is this, and you just went with it. And then the one member of the council basically made it obvious that they should be the chair, because they spoke up and said, no, we've only got half an hour, did it so beautifully. And at that point I thought, I think he's going to be the chair. So it was just fascinating to experience that. And I don't know how you did it in the time. My experience of being in those votes, I've been in a couple of them in the previous version of the council, is you have a chair who, and I hope we can, I'm happy to not be anonymous, Ted, but I also don't want to diss other people, but we had a chair who wasn't, who coped with the job, but it wasn't her natural forte, shall we say, bearing in mind of the rabble that she had as parish councillors. And so somebody would put up an alternative to her. And although, I had many run-ins with her, many situations where I even said I was going to resign if she didn't do this particular thing because I felt it so strongly about it. The other person that was put forward was so much worse. So it was a bit like our national government. It's like, oh God, which person do I not want to run everything? So you go for the least worst option. So I always ended up voting for this particular councillor as the chair because she was the least worst option on offer. So suddenly we had this new system where there's all these amazing people, and we got to hear from everyone why they wanted them. And it was just such a lovely atmosphere to know that people were so valued. And as Patricia said, no one had to stand there and go, oh, there you go, this is why I'm good for this, which kind of is what is normally required. And I think we probably ended up with people who may not even have put themselves forwards, for all we know. But that doesn't matter with the sociocratic system. So it gets the right person for the job, whether or not there's someone who would automatically put the hand up. And I thought that was very key. The time element that Ben mentioned, it felt like a lot to get, but it was 1 hour. And when it came to the vote, the official vote, it was so quick. And ultimately, it's an investment of time, but it's actually, compared to the normal way of doing it, not really taking that much longer. And the biggest difference is at the end of that voting process, you don't have anyone who's feeling like they've lost or they're disregarded. You've got, everyone's pretty much happy with what the outcome is, and anyone who's been put forward knows how valued and important they are, because they wouldn't have been put forward in the first place otherwise. So I thought that was very, very powerful. So the last thing I wanted to say was that atmosphere at the end of the process was very harmonious. I mean, it's like a team, and that's what was missing for me the whole time I was at the parish council. I fought like hell to get Nate in, and suddenly you've got a bunch of people who are even open to even having and trying that process, and that's what's really magical for me about the whole thing.
Okay, thank you, Patricia.
I just wanted to add, I agree with all that has been said, and I wanted to add something else, and it is, I subsequently attended the full parish council meeting. I was in the audience as the district councillor, and I was watching this group of people with their new chair, and the process planted something very special, because the chair felt like he had been chosen by everybody, so he's already held. He was fantastic, and the group went through probably the worst meeting in the next 4 years, because it was a very operational 3.5 hours making silly decisions, and you could see how everyone was losing the will to live. But even through all that, the voting was as a team. It doesn't mean that they agreed, but they said something, the other one said something. The conversation flowed, the chair guided it, and the voting again was easy. So it has also been like a seed for a future process and of engagement, which is very valuable.
Thank you. Susie.
All right, just to add on to that, I completely agree with Patricia. I think that's a really important point, that though the sociocratic process happened prior to the formal vote for the chair, it has already had an influence on how the team work and the approach that everyone takes. So even at that level, I think it's really powerful.
And so I shared some questions with you ahead of time, but I want to sort of chop and change them a little bit so I can stay with the thread of what's coming up. Because but just as a point of information for the people who are listening in, the rules of the council that you came in with did not allow decision-making by consent. It required majority decision-making in the main council meeting. So as you've all pointed out, this was something that happened in order to lay the groundwork for having an effective council meeting. But you have some leeway to change those rules going forward. And my understanding is that you began to explore that immediately the following weekend. And I'd love to hear more, anything you care to share about how you've used consent-based decision-making since then in the last few weeks, whether in council meetings or in planning meetings or wherever that's come up for you. Yeah, Edward.
Okay, but talking about consent decision making, because that's a very important one. This is something we kind of had an idea before we got elected, but to be honest, this election was a bit like the diving in. Nevertheless, we've always tried to use that process in a very crude way. We need to improve. We need to get those tools into more details, but we're always trying to propose, ask for objections, and now there's good understanding of these, you could say, 3 levels of appreciations. You agree, you've got concerns, or you've got a paramount objection, which are welcome. So it's about listening and bouncing back on what Susie and Patricia said. It's funny how the process influences the behaviors, and the behaviors calls for the process also. I think here we didn't change much of the structure, the existing committees, and it was we had a retreat 2 weeks after our election to have this intense work retreat. We decided not to change the structure because someone came up with, why was it not working before? And the answer that came up was mostly because of the people. So you need to have people with the right mindset to try to make it work. And in this retreat, we also had a little 1 hour and a half session about decision by consent, and it is something, the way that people bring in ideas and solutions, listen and test, etc. It feels it's seeping in a little bit. And regarding the more official way, like when will it be in the parish council meetings? So we have these so-called standing orders, which I'm learning about it. This is all a bit new for me. They're like our local laws, if you like, how we hold meetings and different stuff like that. And it happens that our clerk is a lawyer by formation. So this is which is the brilliant guy. And he cleared for us all the basic legal requirements for standing orders, including those that include maybe voting in meetings, etc. So I'm already starting to look into it, like, are there cracks or the way it's worded? Can we just twist it like this? So it's very early stage. We created a circle for that also, which we call Discovery Circle, and it will be one of the topic of this circle to look into this.
Great, thank you. So you've been using consent decision making in the flat pack group of councilors to think about where you're going to take things in the council. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, not in official meetings yet, because we cannot make decisions by consent yet, but in pre-meetings, we're trying here or there. I mean, I'm not attending every meetings because there's too much, but I think it's something that people really got interested into, and it's just about getting the habit. It's about reprogramming ourselves, and whenever it's needed, sometimes you might have to make a decision which needs to be fast, and you don't need to go through consent decision making. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And Benjamin, do you have any other stories that you'd like to share about your experiences past few weeks?
Yeah, I think that there is a sense of, a skilled facilitator, an independent facilitator being very important in this process, not least in, holding course of decisions being reached in whatever modality, but also in, keeping that objectivity as to what is being discussed, whether they have an interest in it personally or not. And that's one of the reflections that, we've really got from our mentors in FRow in the flat pack democracy team, is the import of having that independent facilitation, whether it's sociocracy or whether it's some of the other skills that we might explore. And I guess, having a actual team in the parish council itself, the actual professional office team there, very amenable and skilled in terms of their ability to help us alter or change standing orders which are not, embedded forevermore in tablets of stone, means that we're since our retreat that Edward's been talking about, this discovery group, going on to kind of look at what is and what we might be working towards in a gradual process, because you can't just arrive and, well, you probably could, but we didn't feel comfortable coming in and throwing out everything that had gone on before. There's some of these processes that they're working really well, and B, some of them it may be behooving on us to keep them. So the degree to which we kind of are intersplicing these different disciplines and what was before and what might be coming in future, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating, and it feels like that combination of what we have in terms of the group who are actually doing the work of delivering local government in our community, and us as a set of people who are willing to experiment with different ways of really reaching out and engaging with the community and working together, means that we can in a very steady and intentional way take this on without doing anything too radical that's going to shake things up too much. So it feels like we're in a good place. But I've just come back to this piece. It feels important that in our experiments, because we don't know how to do it yet, we've had a go, a very close facilitation by you. It feels like we're going to need that hand holding over a period of time until these sets of habits become habituated and the norm.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So I've heard several people mention other kind of allied ways of working beyond the flat pack. And so I'm curious, what are you hoping is going to be different, either using sociocracy or using some of these other techniques? For example, I think I heard somebody mention constellations as one of the approaches that you're considering. And I should make it clear that from my point of view, sociocracy is a really fantastic kind of holistic system, and it is not the only system or approach that people can use, and it really works better when it is combined with other approaches that cover some of the things that it doesn't cover. So I always love to learn more about how people are playing with that. If you want to share anything about that, I'd love to hear it. Yeah, Benjamin.
I guess what's before kind of arriving at the place we're in now, and before really engaging with a studious look at sociocracy, what's always been of interest to me is sortition, and actually even beyond sortition, models of participatory democracy. Like, we've got tech now that could and I'm always kind of steered in the direction of blockchain, distributed ledger, as ways to which we might be able to actually have ongoing participation in all decision making. I'm really interested in that. And what are the steps towards that? Do we start playing with working groups that are deliberated on in sortition based models that then goes on into something that's a bit broader, and and on and on and on from there? I'm very interested in what that looks like from a very grassroots level, in a very small pilot kind of scale, to then take steps on and see what we do and what we can develop in terms of systems and in terms of actual deliverable technology that's encrypted or secure or that's, proved on the way. That seems like a very fascinating journey. And yeah, I wonder the degree to which constellation work can be an adjunct to, I don't know, teasing out or fleshing out more of what shows up in the deliberative process of sociocracy. It seems like a very useful tool in work I've done before with groups. Yeah, I think there's a blend to be arrived at here, which I don't know whether will be specific to Forest Row alone, but there's a lot of interest certainly from my perspective in which of these sets of tools that land might be replicable in other situations or in different scales of governance or organization.
That's great. Susie, I see you. I just wanted to briefly say, for those who are listening in that don't know yet, sortition is a way of selecting people from the population, local residents, at random, in a way that's similar to like a jury selection process, so that it selects people at random to represent their community and get involved in making decisions as part of the government process. And there's various different ways of doing that.
Definitely a term that needs a new term that isn't totally boggling and only about 5 people know what it is. So.
Yeah, another 5 people now, the people who are watching this. Susie.
So to say, I agree with Ben that it'd be great to look at how technology can support, mainly from accessibility, because there's certain people who would be very difficult for them to get into the room, and so that does need to be looked at. But nonetheless, sitting in that room as a guest, really, of the parish council, working on an unofficial meeting of choosing their chair, using Sociocracy. It was, there's something about being in a room with human beings, and you can't skip that. And I think that has to be at the heart of it. And then talking about different systems, I'd experienced, which was wonderful, XR, especially when they were first early days and they came to the village and I experienced their people's assemblies process and this structured way of brainstorming and being listened to. It was wonderful, but they soon found out that didn't, sometimes you need to get shit done. You need to make a decision. So there's different stages of the process and you need different systems. And for me, personally, I think sociocratic processes are particularly good then ideally after you've allowed people to speak and feel heard and stuff, which is only going to speed up because you were doing it absolutely cold in that 1 hour. So you've got all of that going on, perhaps in the smaller group meetings, talking with the community. Then you've got your subcommittees who might want to have a more sort of open, free-flowing conversation. But I think a lot of the time, by the time it gets to a sort of subcommittee, then the sociocratic process right off the bat then I think is a very valuable one, because actually I think it does save a lot of time. And I think that the idea that you only need the kind of this the idea of getting consent, there's situations you can just do it quickly. There'll be a few, but I think you'd be surprised how few they are. So for example, the question of whether we should keep the guy who goes around and checks that people are parked, the warden, was a very contentious issue, and it wasn't, there was no, you can't make a subcommittee for everything. So it took up a huge amount of time, of main council time, and became very heated. And so for what might with another council be a fairly straightforward, logical discussion, for something like that, I think I'd be surprised how often the sociocratic method will be incredibly useful. Wherever there is anybody, 2 people who don't agree, it's just a good way to cut through all of that. Like the last thing I want to say was that with the subcommittees, I think that would be particularly powerful, because in a way it was like a subcommittee, who will be our chair, and then when you got to the main council, the decision had pretty much already been made, but it was still checked for consent. But I think that process of consent, the psychology of that process, is a very powerful one, and I think it would naturally spread and become part of the language of not just the council, but the way they interact with the community, which is a really positive thing. That's my thoughts on it.
Anything else on other? But yeah, Patricia.
I guess I wanted to add something about the process. I mean, this whole process started last September, about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months ago. And we have been experimenting, seeing what works in the community, feeling like what can you serve a wave of energy where there is interest. And so in that process, you were asking for different sorts of methods, and perhaps at the beginning, the important thing was for someone to convene, to invite people for a conversation, and perhaps the response would have been non-existent, and then the process dies. But there was a response, and then there's a holding without control, and perhaps it was about why are we convening this? What's the information that you need to understand about local democracy? So it was about information. And then you keep seeing, I mean, are the people going to run with it? At the same time, there is this team building happening. There was a lot of fun, excitement, a sense of building for what we dream rather than criticizing what we don't like. So there was a creation of a very positive energy, which talks to what Eduard was saying about, I don't know if it is the type of people, but it is also the process through which people go in order to be more open to a particular method of decision making. So the moment when they were elected, they had already been creating a team. They were they knew each other. It was fun. It was exciting. And then Sociocracy came when they had to start making decisions. We had other facilitators, and yeah, it's like working with the process in a way. And yeah, Sociocracy is just definitely something that probably will be key. Hopefully, we'll see. It's early days.
Yeah, Susie.
I just wanted to back up, not that it's needed, but what Patricia said, because I was in awe of how she created this amazing safe space for people to come in. And it was interesting because there was a lot of certain no longer elected parish councillors who were accusing it of being a coup and all kinds of things on Facebook. And I was on there going, well, actually, they didn't even know they were going to be standing when they started this process. So Patricia's right. There was a lot happened before they came to that space of coming together, of being inspired, of sharing. There was a brilliant visionary workshop where people put through their ideas. It was all put up on sticky things. And then you were looking around thinking, oh my God, all these other people who I don't even know really all have the same visions. And that was a very, very, very powerful thing. And it's only after that, it was like, who wants to stand? Who wants to support? And you can't, it's, and I think that's really important to remember at every level. So if for the council to do what they want to do, they need the community to step up and to participate. So as a model to get them to the point where they are ready to commit to maybe forming a support group for a particular initiative, at which point then the sociocratic governance, I think, will mean they'll stay because it will be so much nicer for them. But you do need that run up as well. And Patricia, I have to say, you managed it brilliantly, and Ben and all of you who got involved in that. It's just all credit to you. It was amazing.
Thanks, Susie. It was a team, definitely teamwork. Yeah, in a very special place.
Well, and this is the last question that I have in my list. And it connects to that, which is this question of why is FRow the first council in the UK to try this out?
Patricia.
Is it you, Patricia?
I guess FRow is just a very exciting and wonderful place that is, you know, it has the people. I guess you can only invite, and if people don't take it on, you can't do it. And we just have people who are willing to live differently, people who want to create a different world. And I guess that's what we cottoned onto. And we're just lucky that people took it on. They could have equally just not have done it. So it is a very interesting village in the UK, really.
Do you think, Patricia, that it's also because people of FRow, there's a section of the society who are very happy to take responsibility and stand up and take on that load, because they have made particular decisions in many cases to be here. They have thought out of the box. It is an ideal setting. They haven't. It's not just like a suburban street where everyone goes and does their 9 to 5 and watches and does video games when they come home. No disrespect to anyone who does that, obviously, but it is a very particular place which tends to draw people in who are prepared to stand up and go, actually, I want something different. And that's the energy that you tapped into with all your other collaborators who supported this.
Yeah, and let's not say that it is a homogeneous village. It has all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life, but there is a good percentage of people who want to see things happening differently, and then that's why it happened here. And you're around, Nathan and Susie, you know.
Yes, thank you, Patricia. So, and Ben, I thought you made a hand gesture.
I was swatting away a fly. I think Patricia said, you know, there's something about the size of the community as well, and it's nominally a village of the upper end of what's constituted to be a village of 5,000 people, but there's a huge ecosystem of folks here and of various different disciplines and maybe non-mainstream kind of beliefs or practices combined, you know, in a kind of rich brew with a lot of folks who are of an age where they've got kids, so they probably don't want to be in London anymore living there, but are still connected professionally, and there's a lot of experience in a whole suite of different disciplines. So you've got, you know, an amazing assemblage of skills and scale and resource and orientation, as Patricia said, towards, you know, being willing to try things differently, or and a sense of, like, you know, if not us, then who, and, you know, if not now, then when. There's definitely, you know, that certainly through the XR piece and COVID, I think there's a lot that lends itself to it being a good place for this to be explored and expressed right now.
Thank you. And Edward, is there anything you'd like to add to that, since we're coming up close to the end of our time together?
Well, to the question, why do you think FRow is the first council in the UK to use Sociocracy? Was said before, a bit of a special place, FRow. There's definitely a tendency, it's not homogeneous, but it does feel, I've only been here 3 years, quite privileged from a financial point of view. People tend to be quite well educated also. I don't know, it's just like a combination of characteristics, but I try to look at it more globally. If it not had been in FRow, it would have been elsewhere. And so there's the starting point of FRow, which is like a germ, but what's interesting is to look how this process might eventually diffuse. And it's it's like in physics, it's sometimes you have like a sand slope, and it's depending on the grain size, it's ready to collapse, and you just have one grain falling. It could be this one, it could be that one, but basically what you have to see is that you have a big slope, and once one grain falls, it hits 2, hits 4, 8, and you have an avalanche, etc. So is the world ready for this sort of thing? I don't know.
Well, I certainly hope so, and thank you for that lovely metaphor. Ted, do you have any questions that are no? Okay. Well, I just want to say, sorry, go ahead, Ted.
Just gratitude.
Yeah, me too. I really appreciate the 4 of you sharing your special place with us and with the world. And I look forward to putting this online and hearing what kind of responses people have to it. Does anybody have any sort of last remarks you want to make before we wrap up? Yeah, Susie.
Just to say thank you, Nate, for being so patient and hanging on in there and just being there on call and being available, because that is it wouldn't have had that experience without you giving up quite often a lot of your time to support this. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, we've been on this for a few years now.
Yeah, I'd like to read Ted's book, and I'd like to do more stuff with you, Nate, going forward. So
I'm thoroughly in favor. That sounds good to me.
Yes, we shall meet again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Nate, and thank you, Ted. And definitely will read the book.
Okay, wonderful. And all right, well, take care, everybody, and we'll continue to be in touch.
Thanks so much.